Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalam ala Sayyidina al-Anbiya wal Mursaleen. Assalamu alaikum. I'm here to welcome you to the Ummatics Institute. The Ummatics Institute is a institute designed to think about the thought and practice of taking the Ummah seriously and to empower Islamic civilization through a platform for thinkers, visionaries, and doers to uplift the spiritual and intellectual capacity of the Ummah and to have the Ummatic as an inherent part of our existence. So long as the Ummah exists, which it does, alhamdulillah, the Ummatic thought and practice will always be there. And that means that, one of the basic tenets of the Ummatic Institute is that the Ummah need not go through nations, international bodies, need not go through, corporations in order to voice itself and to be heard. And the Ummatics platform and the Ummatic Institute is such a platform where the Ummah is allowed to think for itself and allowed to consider its own interests by bringing together beautiful people like yourself. Today I have the pleasure of introducing our guest of honor and speaker, Mrs. Lauren Booth. She is a broadcaster, journalist, author, and activist. She was, as I remember, in my younger days, a strong advocate for the anti-war protests when the Iraq War happened. She was an inspirational voice to all of us. She stood steadfast in many rallies, raising the voice of peace in a very difficult time where I remember, everybody seemed like everybody wanted to go to war. And no one was willing to listen. Later on, we learned that the whole war was not only illegal, but immoral, cost millions of lives, and it was people like, Mrs. Booth, who held a very, very distinguished position in such difficult times. Since then, she has been an advocate for the Palestinian cause, at every moment talking about the injustices that are happening there. Today, she's also going to speak on that topic. She's been an inspirational speaker and a voice of wisdom to global audiences everywhere. We are honored to have her. I'd invite you to give a round of applause for our guest speaker. Before I give her the floor, I wanted to, I was thinking after being at, I want to thank our gracious hosts at TUGVA, Türkiye Gençlik Vakfı, for allowing us to host this distinguished meeting here. As someone from the subcontinent, the poems of Iqbal constantly resonate in my head. So I remember one that I think is very appropriate for today. He said, "Ayn jawan marda haq goyi o bebaki. Ayn jawan marda haq goyi o bebaki. Allah ke shehron ko aati nahi rubahi." Which means that the sign of a young person is to say the truth without any hesitation. That's what it means to be youthful. And he said, and the following misra in the verse is that he says, "And the lions of Allah don't know the trickeries of the fox." And today, is a very special day. We're speaking about Gaza on the day of Ashura, a day in which justice, the banner of justice, was held high in Iraq many centuries ago, but which lives on in our hearts even today. So in commemoration of the sacrifice of Ahl al-Bayt and Imam Hussein and what happened in Ashura, as well as remembering that the lions of Allah speak truth without any hesitation, I wanted to turn it over to Lauren. Today, just 2 days ago, Israel bombed a school. We're at a youth organization. Israel bombed 5 UN-affiliated schools, killing 22 people who were seeking shelter, over the last months of the conflict, Israel has killed almost 8,000 students and destroyed completely 114 universities in Gaza. Despite all of that, when this question was posed to the White House, the spokesperson said that Israel is still trying to conduct investigations as to why civilian casualties, why there has been civilian casualties in this targeting. I mean, the stats are that basically 188 schools out of 320 schools in Gaza have been attacked, right? And 2/3 of 183 UN-affiliated schools have been destroyed, and more than 14,000 students have been injured, and more than 8,000 have been killed. So, given these stats, I wanted to now, in the name of youth and in the name of a day that commemorates justice in our tradition, I want to give the floor to Sister Lauren Booth. Today she's going to talk about discovering Ummatic confidence after Gaza. Lauren Booth, the floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Oh, this as well. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli wa sallam. Esteemed guests, directors of Ummatics and of this center, thank you so much for this invitation and for allowing us to join here today, as our brother said, on this very precious day of Ashura. Allahumma rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm not an academic, but I just want to share some observations with you today. And the first one is this, and we don't have to agree on everything. All right, it's really important going forward, and as we grow as a young ummah, and a young intellectual ummah, mashallah, that we learn to disagree with harmony. So personally, I don't like applause. I feel that it is not a way, or the best way. This is just my feeling. It's not the best way for us to treat one another. And brother, with due respect, he may disagree with that, and I understand from the Western context. I also understand why for a long period we didn't shout Allahu Akbar on campus, because you get security rushing in. But when I first came to Islam 14 years ago, it really touched me as a Western performer, as an actor, as someone whose nafs was really out of control, to walk onto a stage to silence, to give a talk and then walk off to silence. That really sorts out your nafs, and it helps us to really remake our niyyah for why we're here. And also I do remember hearing people say, Takbir, Allahu Akbar. I'm thinking, okay. So mashallah, that's just a little observation there. I want to begin by talking about Gen Z waking up from a nihilist stupor because of what we are all facing on our streams and on our platforms. And then waking up from this nihilist stupor has been a ray of light in an otherwise very dark moment for our ummah. You've seen passion, you've seen determination, and it seems to be that this passion, which was turning inwards, do we need a translator, by the way? Because I'm talking quite a lot. What do we think? Is everybody okay with English?
It's in English. It was advertised in
brilliant.
English.
Great,
Program.
okay, great. So that passion and determination that we're seeing now had for the last 8 to 10 years been turned inwards into identity politics. I'm a unicorn, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I change every day, I don't want this. And now that generation of the West have gone, I remember talk about a transgender genocide. Well, that kind of went away in view of a real genocide. And and the young are disgusted and having to reevaluate what is important in life, as we all must do when faced with something this traumatic, important, and something that has really made me reflect with a bit of a smile on my face, I've got to be honest, is that the Zionists cannot have imagined in all of their intricate plans that Abu Ubaidah would be a TikTok sensation from New York to Los Angeles, from Brisbane to Belgium. Now that's going to be a surprise for them. I want to go backwards a little bit to really show some respect for what the awakening is like for our young across the world. Because awakening from a stupor brought on by junk food and what Sheikh Hamza called junk lives can be very sudden. It can be that 360 turn, 180 turn. 360 means you come in a circle. I'm not an academic, you see. Definitely not a mathematician, but a 180-degree turn. You see, I have been taught all my life as a journalist to fear the resistance. I've been told that the resistance in Palestine was akin to the Taliban, that they existed out of hatred to our values. Before setting sail to Gaza, as I did with the Free Gaza mission, 2 years before the Mavi Marmara would be attacked, a family member called me to tell me a message. So imagine, before you're sailing to Gaza, you get this message from a family member. They said, we have it on good information that there are plans to kill or kidnap you when you get to Gaza because they hate you for being British. By the grace of Allah, I still got on the boat. By the grace of Allah alone. And what did I see as we pulled into Gaza on those 2 little ships? 30,000 Palestinians raising the takbir. I remember it like it was yesterday. Gaza, beautiful Gaza rising out of the midst. And then hearing, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And honestly, everything that could float was in the sea. I saw surfboards, I saw old fishing boats. I imagine perhaps I saw a bathtub at one point, but I think that's imagination. We were pulling children up onto the deck with kafirs. And I remember then seeing for the first time the men in black, the men I'd been warned to fear as a Westerner. They climbed on board the boat. There's no doubt they were intimidating. Black t-shirts, black fatigues, black guns, black beards. I wasn't Muslim. I was a bit intimidated. But then I saw a couple of those brothers going like this. Assalamu alaikum. I'm like, have you got something in your eye? No, I'm fine. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So, talking about ummatic confidence, let us reflect on the non-Muslims who are willing to lose their friends, their family, their degrees, their future work opportunities for people they have never met, in a foreign place they've been taught to fear, in a religion that is not their own. You see, we should be able to understand the sobbing middle American mum who can't breathe when she watches a version of herself in Gaza, holding not one but several white bundles. And how amazed is that mother in Texas when she hears the mother in Gaza saying, "Take from me until you are pleased, Ya Allah." We can understand the raging kid from Los Angeles screaming into the camera, "How can this be happening?" And the college kids, we mustn't forget those on the lawns across America and the United Kingdom, even France, who spent weeks refusing to go home until something was done to give meaning to the darkness in their hearts that their student fees would continue to support genocide unless they took a risk personally. We are seeing those who are not beloved of Allah leading the way in solidarity for those who are. Allah, what is the meaning of this? I had to personally go to Gaza to discover life's crucial meanings. So the first point I want to make is this reminder. Islam was, is, and will always be the answer to humanity's issues on every level. In Bayt Lahia, I learned as a non-Muslim from the Bedouin how to be generous even in poverty. I remember going to a Bedouin encampment, and the mother was cooking on a stone, really ancient way of making bread, and she didn't know me. She said, come and have a try. I ruined all their bread. And when I touched it, it shriveled up. When I picked it up, it fell on the floor. Honestly, I thought, I'm going to starve these people. Alhamdulillah, we took them some food afterwards, but she was so Noraini. I remember in a Gaza high-rise apartment, a mother who was working on her higher maths PhD taught me, a Western feminist, the possibility of putting your family first and still being brilliant in your calling. But there is a proviso. She had barakah of time. I don't believe non-believers have barakah of time. And many of us do not have barakah of time. Ya Allah, increase us in what pleases you to give us barakah in time. In Bayat Hanun, a mother called Iman showed me her injured, shocked children and taught me to say, Alhamdulillah. In Khan Yunis, the families taught me the meaning of community with their friendship. In Jabalia, a group of young female students schooled me, an arrogant journalist, about the meaning of the Balfour Declaration. I learned about the Balfour Declaration not in a British school, but in Jabalia camp. In Gaza City, a brother with no legs called Mohammed Ashur, still giving to his community right now, taught me the meaning of yaqeen, trust in Allah. We're looking at the meaning of life. So here's a question for you and I, in our safety, in our luxury. Ask yourself this: do you really believe in your deepest heart and my deepest heart, and in our nafsani aql, in our intellect, that Islam has the answers to today's global problems? Sit with it a moment. Let our mind throw up its educationally damaged doubts. But science, but economy. And though the British people are so nice in business and they do queue for a bus. Let's go back 100 years. I want to give you an example as relevant today as it was in the 1920s and 30s. 100 years ago, the scholar, journalist, and Jewish revert to Islam, Muhammad Assad, pondered on the egocentricity of the Euro-Western cultural outlook. Of his youth in Austria as a young educated Jew, he later wrote in the 1950s, "Not that I was unhappy. No, I was certainly not unhappy. Only deeply dissatisfied, unsatisfied, not knowing what I was really after, and at the same time convinced one day I would know it." Isn't this very similar to a lot of the feelings that young people have today, our students have today? It's a definition of nihilism's deep dissatisfaction of the soul. But Wendy Sifret wrote a book called The Sunny Nihilist in 2021, where nihilism is being reframed as something potentially life-enhancing. I'm not an academic, so I understand nihilism very simply as there's no point to anything, do what you want. Is that an okay definition of nihilism? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, acceptable.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. She describes this nothing matters philosophy as a balm for a group of people burning out over exceptionalism, economic downturns, performative excellence, housing crises, and living your best life on Instagram. Sounds like a lot of pressure. And today you can get Nietzsche coasters and nothing matters cross-stitch kits on Etsy. How horribly sad. Recently, I sat with a Turkish psychologist who specializes in teen problems. I asked her to define for me what are the biggest issues of facing young people in Turkey. What are the biggest issues? And I was talking about everything from self-harm, suicidal tendencies, anorexia, raging episodes of anger, drug addiction. I waited for her list. She said it all comes down to one thing. Our young don't know why they are alive. Allah. This is what Muhammad Assad was describing 100 years ago in Europe, and it has seeped into our Muslim lands. As the yaqeen goes out the window, in comes the sense of pointlessness. I don't know why I'm alive. Ya Rabb. Never in history has mankind had so much will and yet so little time to consider our roles in the family, in our faith, in our societies. We get glossier, we get nicer facial moisturizers, we can even change our noses if we want. But what are we devoting ourselves to? Is it to the pleasure of God? So as we go on to discuss Ummatic's confidence, I want to pose you another question. If you've got children, or there are younger brothers and sisters in your house, ask yourself this question. How would our own children, youngsters, react to just a small inconvenience lasting 48 hours? Imagine in your house, for the next 2 days, there was no electricity. No internet. No. Imagine no water for 2 days. You had to buy bottles, or you had to go to a neighbor, and you couldn't wash and you couldn't keep clean. Allah. Gazan people are reminding us that children can act upon the Quran too. Are we taking these lessons? I put to you that so long as we're training our young, that Oxbridge and Ivy League universities are the Jannah of global education, then our current generation and the next to come will be attendees at the party of extremism. Extreme self-absorption, extreme ideas of fun and having a good time. From overeating to watching soap operas which feature extreme life changes, sex changes, murder, wife swapping. There are no red lines on TV now, or in the entertainment industry. Now we have something to compare this to, don't we? The father, see if you remember this. Do you remember the father who told his son off for crying over dead family members? Be happy they're shaheed, he said. Do you remember? Do you remember the young man whose brother died and he was in a field hospital and he came out smiling saying, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel? Do you remember him? You can see him. What about Reem's grandfather, soul of my soul? I remember a young boy bathing in the pouring rain in Rafah and thanking Allah for the gift of water. Allah. These are the people of the Quran. They know where to go in good times and when calamity strikes. Resistance leaders living in refugee camps taught me that standing up may mean losing everything you love in this realm, and it's still worth fighting for freedom, with a heart connected to the absolute acceptance of the qadr of Allah. Subhanallah. Do you know that miracles happen in Gaza? And I want to talk to you as our young, because this feeling of hopelessness that is threatening all of us to sink us is from Shaitan. And Shaitan is a liar. Shaitan doesn't want us to know that the unseen realm is very active right now in Gaza. Can you imagine? How is the divine realm engaged? Let me tell you some true stories. Muhammad Ajur, who I mentioned earlier, who lost his legs over 10 years ago and said Alhamdulillah when he lost them, because he still had his hands to hold his mother and he still had his eyes to see his mother. Allah. He started to teach wheelchair basketball. He's currently being starved in northern Gaza, but he's also taking part in a food program and out every day feeding people with no legs. Allah. So I was really nervous about telling Mohammed, who's a friend of our family, about my daughter getting married. How do you celebrate anything in a genocide? Anybody got any ideas? It's a weird one. And I was saying to my husband, I don't want to tell him. But these people are on a different plane to the rest of us. And when I told him eventually, he said, how are you doing? I said, I'm fine. I said, Alex is getting married. And he went very, very quiet. And I thought, you idiot, you've hurt his feelings. You idiot, you've made him realize they're not having these kind of weddings. Oh, I'm such an idiot. And then after a long pause, he said, oh, I'm sorry. I was just thinking, how can I send her a gift? A couple of days after the wedding, it was Mohammed in northern Gaza who was pestering me for news. I'm going to read you some texts. Marhaba, assalamu alaikum. Is everything okay? How was the marriage? Is your daughter happy? Allah. Mansour Schumann. Hands up if you've heard of Mansour Schumann. Fine, I will describe who he is. Mansour is a businessman and a journalist from Canada. He had moved his family to Gaza 2 years before the genocide. And when it broke out, he could have left. But instead, Mansour sent his 5 children and wife out, and he stayed to document what was happening. I've had the honor of meeting him. Every day he would start with, good news from Gaza. We are going to win. Victory is going to happen. This is what you can do. Amazing. I was with Mansour about 6 weeks ago in Qatar, maybe a bit longer. And he told me miracles that had happened to him. And I share this with you so that we know not to feel hopeless. So Mansour told me that after during the attack on Al Nasser Hospital, drones were coming to find him. They have facial recognition drones now, so you could be sitting in this room and you'd go, oh, that one is meant for me. Allahu Akbar. So he knew that they were being tracked by drones and they're armed. And so he and a friend were hiding in a smashed out building. One of those buildings you see with only walls. And he said it was a very intense moment. Bombing was going on, they had to hide somewhere, they didn't know if they were going to make it, and suddenly 3 men in white appeared. Now, as Muslims, the collection of hadith and the collection of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ teaches us to take stories only from trusted sources. True? He is a trusted source. He said, Sister Lauren, I saw 3 men right in front of me, all dressed in white, with white hair and white beards. And it was such a hectic situation, I didn't think to say, how come you're all clean and everybody in Gaza is dirty? And the lead one stepped forward and said to him, you are in the wrong place. You are not meant to be here. The only safe place is through that door. Go now. He and his friend went through a door, closed the door. A few seconds later, the rest of the place was hit by a bomb and totally demolished. Allahu Akbar. He also reported the shaheed of a young man that he knew who just came back to the deen during the genocide. 21 years old. He had scars on his face from a previous attack. And one day he said, I have to go and get food for my family. I'll be back in the evening. So he left Mansour and a few other brothers. And that night he didn't come back. And the next night he didn't come back. And the third night they said, Wallahi, we have to go and find him, even if it means going into a corridor where it's free-for-all shooting by the most immoral army. They found him on the road, face down. And he was shaheed. And Mansour told me, I turned him over and they were shocked. All the scars on his face were gone. And the blood, he said, I got a tissue and I dipped it in his blood because of the smell of musk and I wanted it with me forever. Allah. And then as they were looking for a place to hurriedly bury him, weird, I don't know what this means, nor does he, a white peacock walks along through the rubble and spreads its tail in a beautiful display and then just walks off. They don't have time to take it in because they have to bury a shaheed, but what is that? Allah. The news, the devil's amongst us, the devil's within us. Shaitan wants us to feel hopeless, but we mustn't. Subhanallah. So my final question, and I'll wrap up with this, is what are we doing here? We need to sit down as Muslims, not as a community, because there isn't one community, but we must decide what we want to be accommodated and what we want to give up as a global idealism. Subhanallah. And I will end with this, inshallah. If you want to see the essence of Iman, look at the people of Palestine, and you will see genuine conviction, unwavering resilience, and brave resistance. This is why it is the compass of our ummah. Just as a compass always points north, our compass points where true faith lives and where true believers are. And we are tested according to the strength of our Iman. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. I'll end with the Holy Quran, which as always has the best advice. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice, witnesses for God, even if it be against yourselves or parents or relatives. Whether one is rich or poor, God is more worthy of both. So follow not personal inclination, lest you not be just. And if you distort your testimony or refuse, then indeed God is ever with what you do acquainted. Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. All mistakes are my own, all praise is for Allah, jazakallah khair. Allahu Takbir!
I was going to pass with silence, but then I guess people wanted to applaud. Thank you very much. It was a very inspiring talk, and it reminded us of some of the most important aspects of the conflict, which doesn't get any news headlines, right? And these personal stories of people who are behind the statistics. Today we know that more than 38,000 people are dead, I should say killed, and more than 89,000 have been injured. According to the Lancet report, which is a leading medical peer-reviewed journal out of Britain, they have estimated that the actual number of those who have died due to the conflict is more than 186,000. Taking into consideration what is the actual death toll in war zones of a densely area like Gaza. But, Mrs. Booth's statements here gave us a picture of real human beings and what she has witnessed as a journalist and as an observer and commentator on the conflict. So I thank you very much. I wanted to lead with a couple of questions that your talk inspired me to think about. One immediate kind of paradox that emerged in my head was, you described the West as a place where secular outlooks on life has created a kind of nihilism amongst the culture. Yet at the same time, we observed that during especially the early part of the conflict, young people in the West, but not just young people, you described, mothers who live in Midwest part of the United States or other places in the West have expressed great solidarity with mothers in Gaza. So there seems to be a little bit of a troubling discrepancy there. It seems like there is something, a conscious there amongst that meaninglessness in the West. But at the same time, you observe that in the Muslim world, strangely, Darul Islam, the house of belief, the same kind of vigorous activism as we saw on campuses, for example, in UK and United States, is absent. That doesn't mean that nothing's happening. Obviously, there's a lot of support for Gaza, especially in our hearts, in our minds, and even in material support has gone from the Muslim world. But I can't help but feel as though not enough, or not what merits the Ummah has been done. So how is it that the house of belief falls short, yet the house of nihilism has displayed a vigorous critique and activism? What is your take on that?
Bismillah, thanks for those great talking points. So nihilism doesn't mean that you don't have feelings. It means you don't know why you have feelings and you don't know why you're alive. And that emptiness means that actually you're very, very open to good and bad ideas. And so that feeling of, I don't know why I'm getting up in the morning, and then they're for the first time seeing Muslims in this terrible, I can't say under stress situation, under a genocide, saying, I'm still sweeping my streets, right? Have you been seeing that, the cleanup in Gaza? If you haven't, make sure you look for positive news from Gaza. And I'm talking on an individual strength, dini level here. You know, there are people moving back into their apartments, sweeping up and making tea and saying salam. Wow, it's beyond the capacity for us to understand. But imagine seeing that when you're like, I'm so bored, I hate my life. I mean, moany, whiny. Oh, sorry, don't start me off. I left the West because I'm happy to be here in a Muslim land. My husband and I, we don't want to live in that. And it's a toxin and it's a self-centered illness that luxury gives when it takes everything else from us, every belief, every hope. You know, being human takes work. Go do something for somebody else. And so yes, that very nihilism, by the grace of Allah, can be the low point that allows an awakening, if Allah wills. So activism in the Muslim world, you as brother well knows, our Muslim countries are largely, certainly in the Arab world, ruled over by oligarchs or wealthy royals, we should say. So the people don't have a say. The people in Jordan must be feeling sick. All of those convoys are actually taking aid into Israel, a'udhu billah. They don't like it, but people start going missing if they start protesting. It's very different, you know? So there isn't that kind of activism in the Muslim world because they can't do it. But I'll tell you what, the flotilla that was planning to go from Turkey, do you remember a couple of months ago, the Mavi Marmara 2 kind of thing? For the first time, it was, I would say, 50% Muslims from Jordan, Kuwait, all across the Middle East. Allahu Akbar. There was the normal amount of crazy Westerners, and I can say that as originally being one of the OGs, crazy Westerners who would do that, right? MashaAllah, Allah bless them and bring them to Islam. But the Muslims are there now, but they just can't do it through the formality. And what the house of nihilism is crumbling in the face of belief. So we should have hope, inshallah.
Another thing that came to my mind is if it is the case that a lot of the times we don't see the help that is manifested through the Muslim world because of the political conditions under which Muslims live, what could young people do without, I don't want to say putting themselves in harm's way, because there is a risk to standing up for truth. I mean, there always has been a risk for speaking truth to power, but how could they do it smartly so that it doesn't detract from the goal of helping?
Yeah.
If the kinds of loud, noisy protests that are available to demographics in the northern countries is not available to populations, especially in Arab countries, but also in countries more closer to where we live, then what would be strategies that we could think about together for the youth?
Forgive me smirking at the early part of that. That was a reflection on myself. I was just thinking, you're asking the wrong person about doing sensible things. That is a very academic way of looking at things. I'm all for go put yourself on the line, go take those risks, go. What worth is a degree, you know, for a state that is, you know, and to get a job at MIT and then go to work in an arms factory or in a business that does riba. I'm throw it all out, me. I'd rather be poor and have a little plot of land and work together. I don't believe in any of that system. So that's why I was smirking. It was just more of myself. But what can young people do? I remember Sheikh Hamza Yusuf on a Q&A one day being asked a similar question. What can we do to improve what's happening to the Ummah? Oh, I think it was a private group chat, actually. And he said, well, obviously, we have to be preparing ourselves. How many of us prayed Fajr this morning? How many of us? And the person actually interrupted and said, yeah, but apart from the dini stuff. Whoa. Never seen Sheikh Hamza go quite so pale as he did at that moment. You know, why do we always think the answer is to jump over our deen? What is that? Astaghfirullah, may Allah forgive me. Forgive us all on this day of Ashura. If we actually think that the result is with a politician who is there at the end of the day to save themselves politically, to stay in power for the people around them, no. Gaza is special, not because of its place, but also because of its place. Gaza is special because it's Beit ul-Quran. It's the place where the majority, if not everybody, prayed Fajr this morning. It's the place where after Fajr, the majority will be reading Quran after Fajr. It's where 1,000 Hafiz of Quran were announced just last week, who memorized the Quran during a genocide. Allahu Akbar. Don't jump over these things. This is not small. This is what it's all about.
Very soon I want to open the floor to all of the participants here. But before I do so, I want to reflect on the problem of nihilism. I think one of the major aspects of our psychologies as modern people that you've taken to task in your talk, and I think rightly so, is this concept. I think Nietzsche once described it. Nietzsche once described it as a person who's nihilistic is a person who judges that the real world as it is ought not to be, and the world that ought to be doesn't exist. I think one of the things that I think we're trying to communicate is that this is something that I think we all live with. And when I say we all, I mean not just Western people, but there's a lot of people who are impacted by Western media and Western ideas and modern ideas, even in the Muslim world, who walk around in a postmodern stupor and who believe that the world that ought to be doesn't exist, and the world as it is now ought not to be. Would you say that there's a problem of nihilism amongst Muslims today?
Wow. Just want to repeat, the impact of Western ideals means that possibly Muslims like ourselves are carrying ourselves around in a postmodernist stupor. Whoa, that hits a bit close to home, doesn't it? Because it talks straight away to a couple of things that we may be lacking in our faith. May Allah guide us and increase us. One, yaqeen, the absolute certainty that Allah is in control in every minute and that His way is perfection. And the absolute certainty that He loves the believers and He is with the believers, and that He is directing everything to His way, and we must be happy with that because it's the best way. I mean, that's huge. Those things seem now, don't they, like kind of out of reach. We're all sort of reaching for them. And I think the problem for us is definitely, talk to myself first, social media. Because social media is in our face, but these ideals take work and we have to reach for them. So what's going to impact? What's in our face or what we should be working towards? May Allah guide us. So switching that over, and I'm talking to myself first. Delete the apps, turn the phone off, reach, and Allah will explain how it works. But yes, that's a problem.
I think there is a segment of our scholars who have advocated for spiritual growth in this period of time. But I guess there's spiritual growth and there's spiritual growth. I mean, there's different kinds of spiritual growth. There's ones in which you fall into a kind of eat, love, pray reflection in kind of experimental spirituality. And you're focused again on yourself. You never get beyond trying to push yourself beyond your own psychological problems. I don't mean to downplay mental health issues. What I'm trying to say is that I guess spirituality's goal is to make room for other people in your life.
Yeah.
To control the nafs, to do tazkiyat the nafs, is to ameliorate it to the point where, you know, you can have room for other people instead of yourself. And in terms of Gaza and what's happening that we're witnessing, I guess there's a kind of spirituality. I think you would agree with me that helps you to make room for others. How would you describe the spiritual calling that Gaza forces us to think about?
Yeah, subhanAllah. I love that. Subhanallah. Tazkiyatul nafs. I've never known such generosity and such unwillingness to talk about themselves as I meet in the people of Gaza who are my friends. I speak to friends on the phone when they were during the genocide, and they would not say, I'd say salam alaikum, and you'd expect to go, oh my God, you'll never guess what happened today. Wallahi, it never happened. In Rafah, family, my best friends, 5 daughters, 2 sons, displaced 5 times, mother just died of diabetes. Straight away, number 1, adab, love for the other. Salam alaikum, sister, how are you? How's your family? How's your husband? How's your daughter? I understand she's getting married. And I'm like, in my mind, screaming, stop it. But they want to know because they have love for you, not love for themselves. So that's a big spiritual point. It is not me, it is how are you? And of course the prophetic manners, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, are very simple and very, very unique and very precious. Ask how the person is, ask how is their health, and ask how is their family, and mean it. Sometimes we just trip them off the tongue. How are you? How's your health? How's your family? Anyway, I want to do business, astaghfirullah. No, I never heard that done. Always asking about the other. This hippy-dippy spirituality, this nafsi, self. This danger of Western spiritual nihilism, spiritual self-obsession actually, coming into our deen. What do I mean by that? Do we go to the prayer mat going, I need this to make me feel better? That's Western ideal of what spirituality is. The Islamic ideal is, my God, I've been called by Allah. I want to praise you. I'm here. Labaik Allahumma labaik, Allahu Akbar. I'm here serving you. I'm going to make sujood for you. And you will give me whatever you want to give me, and I'm good with that. That actually is enough. This idea of seeking for a feeling of well-being, oh my God, well-being. Listen, I'm going to tell you, I'm nearly 60 years old. This stuff drives me nuts because it doesn't do you any good. How come if mantras, manifestations, self-respect, inner healing, talking about your anxieties, if that helps, why is suicide through the roof? Why is everybody more anxious, everybody more unhappy? Please, trust me. Don't trust me, trust the Quran. That stuff doesn't work. Stop looking outside the deen at what is glossy. Remember the ayats in Surah Al-Kahf, for example, do not look beyond the believers at the glitter and the gloss of this life. Stay, be patient. That's the answer.
Thank you so much. I wanted to open up the floor to some of the questions, if there are any. Can someone walk around the mic? Yeah. Comments, questions, reflections?
Wes, can you have the color makers?
The what?
The color makers.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Can you please also hold this?
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakumullah khairan, Sister Lauren. My name is Bakir. I just wanted to ask, apart from the nihilism that we talked about, and which is quite important as we see in the West, what's like for us, like I wanted to like see what's your take on like what's the Western psyche when it comes to, for example, Gaza. When we look at it, it's like so simple for us. It's like there's the Palestinians and then there's the Israelis and they came from Europe, and you know, like it's so clear for us that the Palestinians are oppressed and they are Muslim brothers and sisters. But in the West, many people say, it's a bit more complicated. Well, I'm talking about everyday people other than the media or people that have a clear bias or who try to say, we want everyone to live in peace. Like, what's that psyche like? Why don't they see it the same way that we do? Jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum. I just want to touch a little bit on the nihilism part. So, in my experience dealing with new Muslims, non-Muslims as a part of Dawah, I've seen that the part of nihilism that exists between the Muslim youth, that is actually more so because they are grown up as Muslim, born as Muslim, and they don't actually know why they are Muslim. And that's the part I see a lot. So what's your take on that, and how we can improve on that, on telling Muslims growing up, why are they Muslim, why should they be Muslim, why should they choose Islam, why Islam?
Any other questions?
We can take another one. I'm writing it down. Okay, let's do this.
We'll come back around. So what I understood from the questions was that there's a further reflection on the question of nihilism. And I'll add that nihilism isn't just one big thing. I mean, we can separate out, different kinds of nihilisms. So there's a kind of political nihilism that has been very obvious in a country like Turkey and other places where the youth don't have any kind of expectations from political offices or the ability to engender change through the political system as it stands. So there's something that's very different from having what you might call a metaphysical nihilism, in which you see the world as bereft of meaning. There might be other kinds of nihilisms that you're facing. So, maybe can we think about nihilism in a more nuanced way, in the sense that there's someone maybe suffering from a political nihilism and feel a lack of desire to do any activism, but yet be spiritually in a place where you believe in your creator, and you actually do, practice the deed. Or are these things tied together, do you think?
That's getting a bit deep for me. Let's go with Western psyche on Gaza. I would have said that you're absolutely correct. That has always been the case. It's really complicated. If only the Palestinians had accepted the deal in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, whatever they want to invent. They didn't stick to the Oslo Accords. Loads of lies and obfuscations and mistakes and everything that they've heard repeated over and over again by paid-for stooges of the is not real regime. But in this time, I would have to say, my friends from college, my own younger family members saying to me, oh my God, this is awful. Oh my God, how they're shocked that nice Israel is doing this. And you know, we have to kind of I had to take the sneer off my face. I left a couple of groups in fury because they were like bad guys on both sides in the first couple of weeks with all the lies about the rapes and the dead babies and all that madness. But very quickly, thanks to Al Jazeera, thanks to TRT, thanks to news channels across the world that weren't towing the BBC line, it was impossible to cover the wounds. So I would say that complexity, much to the ire of the those who pay for the propaganda for Israel, that's breaking down. That's what we're seeing. Yeah, so they don't have a hold on that because it's not complex. It's just not complex. It's a continual land grab by a Western settler, European settler colony against an indigenous people. And I think if people express that they don't get that now, then they have a deep-seated belief in a settler colony imperialism. In other words, the natives are at the gates. They might not recognize it in themselves, but that's an ugly thing, and I don't see how that can be reformed. But I think it's much smaller than we think. Islamic nihilism, born Muslims don't know why they're Muslims. This is something I've been told time and time again. As I've traveled the world as a convert to Islam, you're a better Muslim than me. I didn't know what Islam meant until a year ago. My family are practicing weird stuff. They don't really know what Islam is. How can this be changed? How can this be changed? What are families getting wrong? Practice what you preach. If you don't want your child to be someone who's addicted to soap operas and thinks that illicit relations are okay, don't have that showing on your Netflix at home. And don't have people who talk about that stuff in your home. You know, as well as the Quran being the backbone, as well as, you know, putting yaqeen in the center. Allah gave you that. Thank Allah, don't thank me, I'm just a means. You know, really speaking in a spiritual way. And I know that that's kind of difficult now. But the Prophet ﷺ did say, Islam started off as strange and it will return to being strange. So welcome to the strangers. We are weird. We are weird. We're unmaterialistic, and yet we live in a material world. We believe in the unseen, and people are like, oh, well, there's a table, book, sky, that's all that exists. We're weird to them. We have to be okay with that. And we must teach our children that unfortunately the majority of people haven't been given the gift of basira, and they can't see what we can see with our heart, seeing with our heart. Yeah, inshallah.
Are there any more questions?
I think that's it. We can conclude, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you very much. If there isn't any more questions, I would like to extend my warm and very grateful thanks to Sister Lauren Booth. It's such a pleasure having you here at the Ummatics Institute. I want to also thank Turkiye Gençlik Vakfı for being host for this very special conversation with Mrs. Booth. And I want to thank all of you for coming out and showing your support and reflecting together on what we could do for our brothers and sisters in Gaza. And with that, I conclude. Assalamu alaikum.